Snape's grudge. No one in Gryffindor Tower slept that night. They knew that the castle was being searched again, and the whole house stayed awake in the common room, waiting to hear whether Black had been caught. Professor McGonagall came back at dawn to tell them that he had again escaped. Throughout the day, everywhere they went, they saw signs of tighter security. Professor Flitwick could be seen searching the front doors to recognize large pictures of Sirius Black. Filch was suddenly bustling up and down the corridors, boarding everything from the tiny cracks in the walls to mouse holes. Sir Cardigan had been fired, and his portrait had been taken back to its lonely landing in the 7th floor. The flat lady was back, and she had been expertly restored, but was still extremely nervous. She had agreed to return to her job only on one condition, that she was given extra protection, and a bunch of surly security trolls had been hired to guard her. They paced the corridor in the menacing group, talking in grunts and comparing the size of their clubs. Harry couldn't help but noticing that the statue of the one-eyed witch on the 3rd floor remained unguarded, unblocked. For it seemed that Fred and George had been right in thinking that they, and now Harry and Ron and Hermione, were the only ones who knew about the hidden passageway within it. "Do you reckon we should tell someone?" Harry asked Ron. "We know he's not coming through Honeydukes," said Ron dismissively. "We've heard through the shop that he'd been broken into." Harry was glad Ron took this view. If One-Eyed Witch was boarded up too, he would never, ever be able to go back to Hogsmeade again. Ron had become an instant celebrity. For the first time in his life, people were paying more attention to him than to Harry, and it was clear that Ron was rather enjoying this experience. Though still severely shaken at the night's events, he was happy to tell anyone who asked what happened, with a wealth of detail. "I was asleep, and I heard a ripping noise, and I thought it was in my dream, but then there was this draft, and I woke up on one side hanging on to my bed and being pulled down. I rolled over and I saw him standing over me, like a skeleton, with loads of filthy hair, holding his great long knife. Must have been 12 inches, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and then I yelled, and he scampered." "Why, though?" Ron added to Harry, as the group's second-year girls who had been listening to the whole chilling tale departed. "Why did he run?" Harry had been wondering the same thing. Why had Black, having got the wrong bed and silenced Ron, proceeded to Harry? Black 12 years ago that he didn't mind murdering innocent people, and in this time he had been facing 5 unarmed boys, 4 of whom were asleep. He must have known he'd have a job getting back out of the castle once you'd yelled and woken up people up, said Harry thoughtfully. He'd have killed the whole house to get back to the portrait hole. Then he wouldn't meet the teachers. He would have met the teachers. Neville was a total disgrace. Professor McGonagall was so furious with him. She had banned him from all future Hogsmeade visits, given him detention, forbidden anyone to give the password to the tower. Poor Neville was forced to wait until the common room every night for somebody to let him in. While the security trolls leered unpleasantly at him, none of these punishments, however, came close to matching one of the grandmother had sent for him, in store for him. 2 days after Black's break-in, she sent Neville the worst thing ever at Hogwarts student could get over breakfast, a howler. The school owls dropped the great hall, carrying small mail as usual. Neville choked as a huge barn owl landed in front of him, scarlet envelope clutched in its beak. Harry and Ron were sitting opposite of him, and recognized the latter as a howler at once. Ron had got one from his mother the year before. "Run for it, Neville," Ron advised. Neville didn't need detailing twice. He seized the envelope and, holding it before him like a bomb, sprinted out of the hall while the Slytherin table exploded with laughter at the sight of him. They heard the howler go off in the entrance hall. Neville's grandmother's voice, magically magnified 100 times its usual volume, shrieking, and how he had brought the shame on the whole family. Harry was too busy feeling sorry for Neville to notice immediately that he had a letter too. Hedwig, and his attentive by nipping his sharply at his wrist. Ouch! Oh, thanks, Hedwig. Harry tore open the envelope while Hedwig tore herself some Neville's cornflakes. The note said, Dear Harry and Ron, how about having tea with me this afternoon around 6? I'll come and collect you from the castle. Wait for me in the entrance hall. You're not allowed out on your own. Cheers, Hagrid. He probably wants to hear all about Black, said Ron. So at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, Harry and Ron left the Gryffindor Tower, past the security trolls at a run, and headed down to the entrance hall. Hagrid was already waiting for them. All right, Hagrid, said Ron. Suppose you want to hear about Saturday night, don't you? I've already heard about it, said Hagrid, opening the front door leading to outside. Oh, said Ron, looking slightly put out. The first thing he saw entering Hagrid's cabin was Buckbeak, who was stretched out on top of Hagrid's patchwork quilt. His enormous wing folded to the right side of his body, enjoying a large plate of dead ferrets. Averting his eye from the unpleasant sight, Harry saw a gigantic, hairy, brown suit and a very horrible yellow and orange tie hanging from the top of Hagrid's wardrobe door. What's that for, Hagrid? Said Harry. Buckbeak's case against the Committee of Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, said Hagrid. This Friday, him and me'll be going to London together. I've booked 2 beds on the night bus. Harry felt a nasty pang of guilt. He had completely forgotten about the Buckbeak's trial was so near, and judging by the uneasy look on Ron's face, he had too. They had also forgotten the promise about helping him prepare Buckbeak's defense. The arrival of the firebolt had driven it clear out of their mind. Hagrid poured them some tea and offered them a plate of Bath buns. But they knew better than to accept. They had had too much experience with Hagrid's cooking. I got something to discuss with you two, Hagrid said, sitting himself between them and looking uncharacteristically serious. What? Said Harry. Hermione, said Hagrid. What about her? Said Ron. She is in a right state, that's what. She's been coming down here to visit me a lot since Christmas. Been feeling lonely. First years we're talking to her because of the firebolt. Now you're not talking to her because of the cat. Ain't Scabbers? Ron injected angrily. Because her cat acted like cats do, Hagrid continued doggedly. She's cried a fair few times, you know, going through a rough time, and moments bitten off more than she can chew, if you ask me, all the work she's trying to do. Still, found time to come help me with Buckbeak's case, mind. She's found some really good stuff here for me. Reckon she'll stand a good chance now. Hagrid, we should have helped too. We're sorry, Harry began awkwardly. I'm not blaming you, said Hagrid, waving Harry's apology aside. God knows you've been enough to get on with. I've seen you practicing Quidditch every hour of day and night, but I gotta tell you two better value your friend more than broomsticks and rats, that's all. Harry and Ron exchanged uncomfortable looks. Really upset she was when Black nearly stabbed you, Ron. She got her heart in the right place. Hermione has you two not talking to her. Well, if she gets rid of that cat, I'd speak to her again, said Ron angrily. But she's still sticking up for it. It's a maniac, and she won't hear a word against it. Ah, well, people can be quite a bit stupid about their pets, said Hagrid wisely behind him. Buckbeak set up a few ferret bones in Hagrid's pillow. She spent the rest of her visit discussing Gryffindor's improved chances of the Quidditch Cup, and at 9 o'clock Hagrid walked them back to the castle. A large group of people had bunched around the bulletin board when they returned to the common room. "Hogsmeade next weekend," said Ron, craning over the heads the two noticed. "What do you reckon?" he added quietly to Harry as he went down to sit down. "Well, Filch hasn't done anything about the passage to Honeydukes," Harry said, even more quietly. "Harry," said a voice from his right ear. Harry started to look around at Hermione, who was sitting at the table right behind them, clearing a space in the wall of books that had been hiding her. "Harry, if you go to Hogsmeade again, I will tell Professor McGonagall about that map," said Hermione. "Can you hear someone talking, Harry?" growled Ron, not looking at Hermione. "Ron, how can you let him go after Sirius Black nearly did to you? I mean it. I'll tell." "So you're trying to get Harry expelled," said Ron furiously. "Haven't you done enough damage this year?" Hermione opened her mouth to respond, but with a soft hiss, Crookshanks leaped off her lap. Hermione took one frightened look at the expression on Ron's face and gathered up Crookshanks and hurried away to the girl dormitories. "So how about it?" Ron said to Harry, as though there had been no interruption. "Come on. Last time we went, you didn't get to see anything. You have to you got to get into Zonko's yet." Harry looked around to check Hermione was well out of earshot. "Okay," he said, "but I'm taking the invisibility cloak this time." On Saturday morning, Harry packed his invisibility cloak in his bag, slipped the Marauder's map into his pocket, and went down to breakfast with everyone else. Hermione kept shooting suspicious looks down at the table at him, but he avoided her eye and was careful to not let her see him walking back up to the marble staircase in the entrance hall, and everybody else proceeded to the front doors. "Bye," Harry called to Ron. "See you when you get back." Ron grinned and winked. Harry hurried up the third floor, slipping the Marauder's map out of his pocket as he went. Crouching behind the one-eyed witch, he smoothed it out. A tiny dot was moving in one direction. Harry squinted. The minuscule writing text read Neville Longbottom. Harry quickly pulled out his wand and muttered, "Descendium." And he shoved his bag into the statue. But before he could climb himself, Neville came round the corner. "Harry, I forgot you weren't going to Hogsmeade either." "Hi, Neville," said Harry, moving swiftly away from the statue and pushing the map back into his pocket. "What are you up to?" "Oh, nothing," shrugged Neville. "Want a game of exploding snap?" Not right now. I was going to go to the library and do some for my vampire essay for Lupin." "I'll come with you," said Neville brightly. "I haven't done it either." Hang on. Yeah, I forgot. I finished that last night." "Great! You can help me," said Neville, his round face anxious. "Oh, I don't understand that thing about garlic at all. Do they have to eat it, or—" He broke off with a small gasp, looking over Harry's shoulder, and it was Snape. Neville, took a quick step behind Harry. "And what are you two doing here?" says Snape, coming to a halt, looking from one to the other. "An odd place to meet," to Harry's immense disquiet. Snape's black eyes flickered to the doorway on either side of them, and then the one-eyed witch. "We're not meeting here," said Harry. "We just met here." "Indeed," said Snape. "You have a habit of turning up in unexpected places, Potter, and you are very rarely there for no reason. I suggest the pair of you return to Gryffindor Tower, where you belong." Harry and Neville set off without another word. As they rounded the corner, Harry looked back, and Snape was running one of his hands over the one-eyed witch head, examining it closely. Harry managed to shake Neville off at the fat lady by telling him the password, then pretending he left to do his vampire essay in the library and doubling back. Once out of sight, the security trolls, he pulled out the map again and held it close to his nose. The third-floor corridor seemed to be deserted. Harry scanned the maps carefully and saw a leap of relief that the tiny dot labeled Severus Snape was now back in his office. He sprinted back to the one-eyed witch, opened her hump, heaved himself inside, and slid down to meet his bag at the bottom of the stone chute. He wiped the Marauder's map blank again and set off to a run. Harry, completely hidden by the invisibility cloak, emerged in the sunlight outside Honeydukes and prodded Ron in the back. "It's me," he muttered. "What kept you?" Ron hissed. "Snape was hanging around." They set off the high street. "Where are you?" Ron kept muttering out of the corner of his mouth. "Are you still there? This feels weird." They were to the post office. Ron pretended to be checking the piece of an owl to Bill a price of an owl to Bill in Egypt, so that Harry could have a good look around. The owls sat hooting softly down at him, at least 300 of them, from the great grays right down to the tiny little scops owls, the local deliveries only, which were small, so they could have sat on the palm of Harry's hand. Then they visited Zonko's, which was so packed that Harry began to exercise great care not to tread on anyone and cause a panic. There were jokes and tricks and to fulfill even Fred and George's wildest dreams. Harry gave Ron whispered orders and passed him some gold from under his cloak. They left Zonko's with the money bags considerably lightly than they had been entering, but the pockets bulging with dongbongs, hiccup sweets, frogs, spawn soup, and nose-biting teacup apiece. The day had been fine and breezy. Neither of them felt staying indoors, so they walked past the broomstick and climbed a slope into the visit of the Shrieking Shack, the most haunted dwelling in Britain. It stood a little way out of the way of the village, and even in daylight it was slightly creepy. With its boarded windows and dank, overgrown gardens, even the Hogwarts ghost avoid it, said Ron, and they leaned into the fence looking up at it. I asked Nearly Headless Nick. He says his head is very rough crowd that lives there. No one can get in. Fred and George have tried, obviously, but the entrance is sealed shut. Harry, feeling hot from the climb, considering taking off the cloak for a few minutes when they heard voices nearby. Someone was climbing towards the house from the other side of the hill. Moments later, Malfoy appeared, following closely by Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy was speaking. Should have had an owl from Father any time now. He had to go to the hearing to tell them all about my arm, about how I couldn't use it for 3 months. Crabbe and Goyle sniggered. Oh, I really wish I could hear that great hairy moron trying to defend himself. There's no arm in I'm honest, and Hippogriff, good as dead. Malfoy suddenly caught sight of Ron. His pale face split into a malevolent grin. What are you doing, Weasley? Malfoy looked up at the crumbling house behind Ron. Suppose you'd love to live there, wouldn't you, Weasley? Dreaming about having your own bedroom? I heard your family all sleep in one room. Is that true? Harry seized the back of Ron's robe to stop him from leaping on Malfoy.